in statistics, you should have some idea of what statistics is. So we are going to start on this terminology sheet. Going to get a few definitions to start us off. So statistics itself, the formal definition is the science of collecting, organizing, summarizing, and analyzing data to draw conclusions and answer questions. Okay, you don't necessarily have to copy it word for word, but kind of get the gist of it down. So essentially, statistics is looking at some kind of data. And we're going to do lots of different things with it. We'll talk about good ways to gather that data, how we can organize it so we can make some meaningful conclusions. I'm going to give you lots of different terms today, but this is one of the really important ones. We are going to talk about a population versus a sample versus an individual. Okay? So if, for instance, I wanted to know how many students in this high school were ready to come back to school this year. The population is everybody. So if I'm only worried about this high school, what is my population? Yeah, all the students in the high school. Okay? But sometimes it's not feasible to talk to every single student. You know, our high school may not be massive, but if you had a high school of 2,000 students, is it feasible to always sit and talk to every single one of them when they go back? No. So we might take a smaller group and look at those groups. So maybe I want to know how many students in the high school are ready, so I'm going to ask you guys. So this group would be my sample. You're part of the whole group, but you're not everybody. You're just a select group from within that. Then an individual would be one person. So if I ask Sarah, were you ready to come back to school? No. No. So Sarah is my individual. She is only one. Then if I ask the whole class and I got 5 yeses and 10 no's, that's my sample. And the population would be if I asked everyone in the high school and I got 150 no's and 100 yeses. Does that make sense? Okay. So that is this little table that I kind of put in the middle. So population, I kind of used some pictures there to illustrate it. The population is the whole group. A sample is a subset, a smaller group from that population, and an individual is just a single person within that. These are terms that we'll use a lot. So if I am collecting some data, there are essentially 2 different things I can do with it. That's the 2 main branches of statistics, the 2 things we'll do in this class. There's descriptive and inferential. So this kind of goes back up to the 2 definitions I skipped. So once I asked everybody, were you ready to come back to school or not? Descriptive statistics would be saying, okay, in this class, this was the number of people that said yes and the number of people said no. So 1/3 of my sample said yes, 2/3 said no. If I said, I could sometimes, not an example I gave you, but mean, median, and mode. If I asked you, how many hours did you work over the summer? I could calculate and say, okay, the average number in my class was this much. The mean, the median, mode, those things that you've done before. Descriptive statistics is just telling what you found. Inferential is when you try to use what you found to make some other guess. So saying, okay, in my classroom, 1/3 of my students were ready to come back to school. So that must mean in the whole high school, 1/3 of the kids were ready to come back. So I don't know that for a fact, but I'm using what I looked at with my small group to make some guess about the larger group. Does that make sense? So those are the 2 main parts of statistics that we'll look at. Descriptive is, and you don't even really have to write this full-on definition. Let's summarize this. Descriptive is, let's just say, summarizing actual data. That's really all you need to write. We're taking what really happened. You are just telling me what you found. Inferential takes what we found in our sample and extends it to the whole population. Okay. My statistics students study for 3 hours every week, so everyone in the high school must study for 3 hours in a week. So inferential, you are making some inference. You are making some guess about a larger group. So to do these things, we look at two different aspects. We look at statistics and parameters. So I know I'm jumping around on your handout. Statistic and parameter falls under this little table. It's the second row of it. A statistic, so make sure you write them down in the correct spot. A statistic is the key word here, based on a sample. And a parameter is from a population. So what I always remember is the S's go together. A sample has a statistic, a population has a parameter. That is the actual numerical value. So saying 1/3 of my kids were ready to come back to school, that is a number, so that is the statistic for this class. You guys make up the sample. When I take your answer, that is my statistic. If I did it with the whole school and I found that 50% were ready to come back, that would be the parameter, because it goes for the entire group, it goes through the population, so it's the number that matches the whole population. So let's take a little break from writing definitions and practice applying these and looking at some scenarios. So I know it's kind of annoying, but you're going to jump to the slides. These are our example the examples, so we're going to look at this first example together. Does everybody have all your definitions down? Okay, so we are going to identify the following as descriptive or inferential, so the two types of statistics. Descriptive just tells what we actually found. Inferential is making some inference from that. So A, the average age of 500 surveyed students in your institution is 23 years. Is that telling what we actually found or making some guess about what we found?
What we actually found?
It said 500 surveyed, so we talked to all 500 people. And we found the average age was 23. So that was what actually is there, so that would be descriptive. Based on a sample, kind of a key thing, anytime you're talking about a sample, that's a situation where we might be making some inference because we didn't look at everybody. So based on a sample of 10,000 Americans, it is fair to say that 70% of all Americans are overweight. So we didn't look at every American. We looked at 10,000 of them. So is this inferential or descriptive?
Inferential.
Inferential. %80 of students in your statistics class dislike true-false questions. Descriptive. I didn't make any guess. I'm just telling you what I found. Is that true? Do you guys hate true-false?
No.
I always hated true-false. I always second-guessed.
You got 50% change.
Hey, but you're just using statistics every day.
No.
Okay, based on a sample of 20,000 college students, we may conclude that 80% of all college students dislike true-false questions. Inferential. We're making a guess about everybody, but we didn't talk to everybody. All right, so do you see the difference between descriptive and inferential? Let's keep going with these examples. Let's talk about parameters and statistics. Remember, A parameter is describing something from the entire group, the population. The P's match up. A statistic is talking about just my sample. So, suppose the percentage of all students in your campus who have a job is 84.9%. So this is the number that we're referring to. We're trying to decide if that number is a parameter or statistic. Does it describe the entire group or just a small part of it? The entire. It's talking about all students, so it's based on everybody. So that means it is a parameter. All right, next. Suppose a sample of 250 students is obtained, and from the sample we find that 86.4% have a job.
Statistic, this is a sample.
Right. Okay, we weren't talking about everybody, we were just looking at our sample, so that makes it a statistic. Let's do one more example, kind of applying these definitions. CBS News conducted a poll in 2013 and asked, do you favor or oppose raising the minimum wage to $10.10? They surveyed 1,009 adults. So first of all, is that a population or a sample? We're talking about 1,009 adults. Do you think they want to know just about that group, or are they talking about everybody? They'd like to know about everybody, but it's not feasible to ask everybody, so they're asking a smaller group, so that's a sample. And found 706 were in favor of an increase in the minimum wage. CBS reported that 70% of Americans were in favor, with 3% error and 95% level of confidence. Don't worry about that percent error and level of confidence. We'll talk about that way later in the semester. So right now, just ignore it. But they talked to just this amount, and they made a guess that 70% of all Americans. So we want to find a few things. The research population. Population is who I was concerned about. So what population were they trying to look at here?
All Americans.
Okay, the sample. They couldn't talk to every single American, so who did they talk to?
2009.
Okay, who would be the individual in this group?
Each person.
Yeah. Can't write. So an individual is just a single person. Okay, the second half of what we're talking about today is talking about variables and all the different aspects of variables that we may be concerned with. We'll start with just a definition of what a variable is. So it's just some aspect that you're looking at in your population. In this case, our variable was if they wanted to increase minimum wage. It's the thing you're looking at. You know, a variable could be as simple as hair color, eye color, height, those types of things, or an opinion in this scenario. So your variable is just some characteristic of the individuals you're looking at. So we're back to our definition page. We break these variables into two different groups. And the type of variable determines what we can do with it. So qualitative, it's sometimes called categorical, but I will always use the term qualitative. And essentially, if you don't want to write it all down, qualitative has to deal with a characteristic. Hair color, eye color, the class you're in first hour. If you're in favor of this, yes or no. It's just some characteristic. Quantitative has the word quantity in it. That one is numerical. A researcher studied factors that affect the eating habits of adults in their mid-30s. Classify each of the following variables as qualitative or quantitative. All right, so nationality, is that qualitative or quantitative?
Qualitative.
I'm just going to abbreviate. Number of children. Household income the previous year.
Quantitative.
Level of education.
Quantitative.
Daily intake of whole grains measured in grams per day.
Quantitative.
I do want to warn you that sometimes you might see a number, but it's not actually quantitative data. So, for instance, if I was looking at the basketball team and I talked about your jersey number. Okay, that's a number, but what's that? Why do you have a number?
To differentiate.
To differentiate between the people. So, does that actual number have a numerical meaning? No, it's just a way of telling you apart. So, almost always, if you see a number, it's quantitative, except in scenarios like that. Okay, Social Security number. That purpose of that number is not necessarily numerical, it's just a way of telling us all apart. So those are situations where it would still be qualitative data. Any questions there? When we look at quantitative data, so if you're looking at how I kind of organize, you'll notice we've got variables, and I broke it into two categories, qualitative and quantitative, and then quantitative only can be broken into two different groups, discrete and continuous. Do you guys know what the difference between discrete and continuous would be? Discrete is like countable, number of students in the classroom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on. Continuous is something that there are an infinite number of values. So if I wanted to talk about weight, okay, depending on what you round to, are we rounding to nearest pound, nearest tenth of a pound, nearest hundredth of a pound, thousandth of a pound, 10,000, 100,000? We could always add on more decimal places there. Does that make sense? So, discrete, and if you don't want to write all this down, basically it has a countable number of values. Continuous is an infinite number of values. So this is how we can differentiate our quantitative data. And if it's discrete or continuous. And all of this is important later on when we start using statistics, the types of data, there's different things we can do with it. Close to being done for the day. A little bit longer. So we'll do a couple examples talking about this. And then there's only one last aspect of the variables I want to discuss today. So consider the study in the previous example. So that's when we were talking about the adults in their mid-30s and their eating habits. We broke down and we had a few quantitative values. So these were the ones that we said were quantitative. I want to know if these are discrete or continuous. Right, so number of children,
Discrete.
discrete, that is definitely countable. All right, household income the previous year.
Continuous.
Continuous. This one you can make an argument. Sometimes these things are not cut and dry. You can make an argument that this could be discrete if we're only taking money to the nearest penny. But you know, sometimes you can take things further. Like when you get gas, it's not always rounded to the nearest penny. They just round up your total value. So, daily intake of whole grains measured in grams per day. Discrete. Can I have a portion of a gram?
Yes.
So typically, if we have decimals, we'll go ahead and call it continuous. Like I said, some of these are not cut and dry. There are situations where it is obviously discrete, situations where it's obviously continuous. Sometimes it depends on how you're using the number. So we will have all those conversations as we go on. All right, let's just practice a little more. So I put a table on here, and I apologize. I think it's kind of dark on your picture. Hopefully you can read it somewhat. So I want to take the stuff we've been talking about and apply it here. I want the individuals. So if you can't really read your table, we have country. And for each country, I put the government type, the life expectancy, and population. So what would be the individuals in this scenario?
The country.
Yep. What are the variables, the things I'm looking at for each country?
Life expectancy, population.
Life expectancy, population, and government type. Okay. For each of these variables, qualitative or quantitative, so government type.
Qualitative.
Qualitative. Life expectancy.
Quantitative.
Okay, since it's quantitative, we could say, is it discrete or continuous? Look at the numbers. 82.07, 81.67, 81.66. Did I use this? I did continuous because of those decimals. Okay, population, qualitative or quantitative? Discrete or continuous? I'm talking about millions of people. It is discrete. They're large numbers. I don't want to sit and count them, but we could. We don't have a fraction of a person, so it is discrete. You guys understand all of these terms and what they mean? Last thing. This is probably the hardest part that we're doing today. We can talk about levels of measurement. This is one of those things that there's not always one clear answer. So we're going to practice some of this. I won't put a ton of this on a test or quiz, maybe a question. But we can talk about different levels. So, nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio levels. Nominal data, it can only be categorized. So things like, where were you born? Are you a male or female? What's your name? What kind of car do you drive? Okay, I can find all those things, but is there any way to put them in a meaningful order?
No.
No. You know, if you were born in Hannibal or born in Quincy, there's not one that goes on top of the other. There's no way to organize that data or put it in a meaningful order. So nominal level, all we can do is categories. Okay, you have blue eyes, you have brown eyes, you have green eyes. Ordinal, basically each of these builds on the other. So you have categories, but you can also rank it. So like the Olympics, gold, silver, bronze. They have categories and we can rank them. Gold is the best, silver's next, bronze is after that. Like class offices, president, vice president, we can put those in a meaningful order. If you, like those questions where strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree, okay, we can break those up and put them in an order. Typically, these two types of data, the nominal and ordinal, this is qualitative data. So not something that's dealing with a number, okay, just something that's categorized. Then our quantitative data, we can do a little bit more with it. Interval level data, we can do all the stuff we were already doing. So we can categorize, we can rank, but it's also evenly spaced. So if I'm talking about your test score, okay, the difference between a 90 and a 91 is the same as the difference between an 80 and an 81, 1%. Okay, there's even spacing between them. Temperature, is it 99 or 100 or 101 degrees today? We can go up by even amounts. Income, dollar increments, those are evenly spaced out. The final level is ratio. So it's all the same things. Ratio is categorized, ranked, evenly spaced, but the next thing, it has a natural zero. Okay. Temperature, we said that was interval level. But temperature of 0, that's a real thing. You can go below that. It doesn't mean the stopping point. Okay, so it's not ratio because you can drop below that. If I'm talking about like elevation, can you have an elevation below sea level?
Yes.
Yes. So it doesn't have a stopping point. That's still interval level. Ratio, we're talking about stopping point. So a height of 0. You can't get below that. That is the beginning. Age. You can't have a negative age. Weight. You can't have a negative weight. So those are examples of ratio level data. So the first two, nominal and ordinal, that's your qualitative. Interval and ratio, this is your quantitative. And this is probably the trickiest thing with that. Let's do a quick example of these. And I have So a study was conducted to assess school eating patterns in high schools in the United States. The study analyzed the impact of vending machines and school policies on student food consumption. A total of 1,088 students in 20 schools were surveyed. Determine the level of measurement of the following. So we're deciding nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. Okay? So the first one, number of snack and soft drinks. So first of all, I'm talking about a number. So that's quantitative data. So which one is it probably going to be? Right, either interval or ratio. Okay, interval does not have a stopping point. It doesn't have a natural zero, but ratio does. Does the number of snack and vending machines, can you have a zero there?
Yes.
Yes. So that means this is ratio data. Whether or not the school has a closed campus policy during lunch. So Is this quantitative or qualitative? Qualitative. So we're talking about either nominal or ordinal. Ordinal means we have to be able to rank these answers. Is there a ranking here? No. So this has to be nominal. Class rank, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Is this qualitative or quantitative? Qualitative, so it's one of the first two. Can we rank these? Yes. So that means this is ordinal. Okay, last one. Number of days per week a student eats school lunch. So quantitative or qualitative? Quantitative. So it's either interval or ratio. Okay? Which one would this be?
Ratio.
Ratio. It has a 0. You can't eat it a negative. Is that okay with everybody? I had a Chromebook activity practicing some of these, but I think I'm going to wait on that. We'll probably do it later on in the chapter as a review one day. So I want to go ahead and let you do your homework. So it is in the textbook.